Hello everyone, it's Liv here, aka Story Minded, and I'm back with another IGCSE video for English Language Edexcel. What I'm going to do for this video is I'm actually going to go through the 2016 exam paper and give you examples of the answers to the questions. In another video, I'm going to also break down the assessment objectives once again for each question. And sort of talk through them and dissect them a bit more for you all, so you have a bit more of an understanding for what examiners are sort of expecting, because I think there can be like a lot of common misconceptions about what examiners want from students in exams, and I just hope to make that a bit more clear for everyone. So the questions that I've answered, I haven't done the writing section. I'm going to just sort of talk about like what I would do, but I've just literally finished writing up the mock answers for the exam paper back in 2016, and this is for paper 1, which is the transactional writing, and my brain has gone, non-fiction texts, so the non-fiction anthology. And if my phone could switch back on, that would be great. So the first question for section A, reading, it's worth 2 marks. It's to do with the unseen text, and it says from lines 1 to 10 select 2 words or phrases that describe the Tromsø ice swimmers. So in this question it's specifically giving you the lines that you need to read, so you don't need to worry about finding evidence from the part of the text as it kind of sets out for you, so you know where to look for. And to write for the answer, I just used 2 quotations, and I used like square bracket, ellipsis, square bracket to sort of show that I cut the quote in half because I don't need all of the quote. So I wrote down in the first bit, a small group of hearty Tromsø ice swimmers, and the other bit I got from the text because there's 2 places to write down your answers. There were 2 men and 2 women, all in late middle age, all in I cannot say this word, all in enviably good condition, to be honest. And then I did another sort of square bracket, ellipsis, square bracket to cut off the quote because I didn't need all the quote. Because those are 2 phrases from that section that describe the Tromsø ice swimmers. So that's that one. Question 2 was for the same text, it's look at lines 11 to 24. And it says, in your own words, explain what the writer's thoughts and feelings are before the swim. So for this part, you could always think about, I would suggest doing 2 points because it's only worth 4 marks. So you could maybe do 1 part about thought, 1 part about feelings. But you still want to make it detailed, even though it's only worth 4 marks. So this is probably handy to... I'm sorry, I keep getting tongue-tied at the moment. It's probably best if you use something known as P paragraphs, which stands for point, evidence, explain. I haven't been in senior school, secondary education for a really long time, so I don't know if it's still the same. But back when we were at school, we were taught 2 different versions. We were taught PEE paragraphs, which is point, evidence, explain. And then the more developed, for the longer questions, are PE day, so point, evidence, explain, develop, analyse and explain again. But for this one I just tried to stick to a P format, but you don't have to do that. You can, so long as you answer the questions, you can write it in whatever way you wish. It's just to help you kind of get the structure and the clarity in your sentences. So for question 2, which is in your own words, explain what the writer's thoughts and feelings are before the swim, and they give you the specific section to look at, I wrote this, and I chose to use quotations from the text to support what I was saying. You probably don't have to do that, but I just felt that would help give the answer more clarity and structure, so that's what I went with, but I still explain it in my own words. So, before the swim, the writer feels out of his depth. Their feelings of uncertainty are expressed through their rhetorical question, what do I stand on while I'm getting ready? After this question, they belittle themselves, which further emphasises how they feel that they are misplaced in the ice swim group. This is shared with the reader through parentheses, meaning the writer is sharing with us their negative inner dialogue. Does it really matter? I'm going ice swimming after all. Furthermore, the writer's thoughts reflect a negative cycle of self-deprecation and nerves. This is exhibited through the writer's direct commentary on their actions. I do quite a lot of laughing rather too loudly. Based on the previous rhetorical question, we can deduce that this overt laughing is actually a sign of nerves. Therefore, the writer is anticipating the ice swim and it is most likely their first time experiencing this type of event. That's the sort of answer I came up with for question 2. So question 3 is still with the unseen text. From lines 25 to 47, describe the dangers and difficulties of the swim. You may support your points with brief quotations, and this is worth 5 marks. So I would recommend doing like sort of 2 detailed points from that section. So coming up with like 2 pieces of evidence and then explaining them. So I'll read you what I have. And obviously this isn't gospel, this is just sort of what I came up with from the text, and it's just trying to give people an idea of how to approach these types of questions. The writer uses war imagery to highlight the dangers of ice swimming. Their use of simile evokes a group of World War II soldiers heading into battle, like an infantry regiment gathering below the lip of a trench. Any history lesson will have taught you that trenches were notoriously dangerous for its inhabitants. By comparing the icy water to this specific setting, our writer is demonstrating to readers how ice swimming is an extreme environment to enter. Similarly, the writer continues this war imagery throughout the passage to emphasise the difficulties of remaining safe when ice swimming. This is shown through the writer's direct recollection, with a final instruction to watch out for sea urchins. We walk on into the water, adrenaline dulling the searing pain of the icy hit as the gunmetal grey sea stretches ahead of us. Firstly, the acknowledgement of a final instruction reminds us of war generals giving advice to their troops before they advance into a life-threatening situation. Therefore, the writer's clever military connection morphs the sea urchins into symbols for hidden enemies. Moreover, the use of weapon imagery serving to describe the colour of the sea as gunmetal grey evokes images of cloudy and turbulent weather. Normally, a calm sea would appear blue, but this description is more likely to make readers think of unpredictable stormy weather and a sense of heaviness, since guns are not light weapons to wield. Thus, the verb stretches becomes even more of a stark indicator that the sea is a formidable adversary. Overall, the writer's considered use of war imagery makes the sea play the role of the enemy, highlighting to readers that they are about to embark on a potentially perilous experience. So, these types of questions, it's really good if you can find like a pattern in the text. So for this question, I was able to find this sort of war imagery, and that's what gets you the higher marks in these exams. You want to analyse a specific part of the text and build that up in your answer to sort of show you've noticed these things, and it gives clarity and it shows that you've understood the text. Like, images that are repeated are there for a reason, and throughout this whole passage there is a lot of like war imagery that you can draw on, and then it just sort of really helps ground your answer and shows the examiner that you're very perceptive with the text. And that's like when you look at the assessment objectives that I'll talk about in another video, it mentions that for the top grades it always talks about being perceptive and understanding a text fully. I'm just deleting these ones that I've done. Okay, so question 4. So this one is where you're going to develop this even more. So we're now moving on to the non-fiction text that you would have studied in the anthology. And it says, remind yourself of 127 hours between a rock and a hard place. This question's worth 12 marks. How does the writer use language and structure to create suspense and tension? Include quotations, and you need to closely reference the passage. So for this, I'm going into what I call full essay style. So I'm going to have a proper introduction, my different paragraphs, and then my conclusion to wrap it up. I would suggest either doing, for this part, doing 2 language points and 2 structure points. So language can be a variety of different techniques. It could be a word, it could be vocabulary, it could be imagery, metaphors, similes, all those kinds of techniques you come across, that's all to do with language. Whereas structure, you can have sound techniques, so alliterations, sibilants, many different types, even the structure of the sentences themselves. So if you've got like a single word paragraph or short sentences, long sentences, that's all to do with structure. Structure can also be the tone of a text, the form of a text. Actually, maybe not the form of it. Well, actually, it can be, because the form dictates the structure of a text. But it's just looking for all these different things. So I would suggest you have 2 language points and 2 structure points, or at least 1 language point in full detail and 1 structure point. Okay, so this is the answer I came up with. In order to create suspense and tension for the reader, the writer uses precise language and a change in structure to express their terrifying experience of rock climbing gone wrong. The writer's description of their view immediately instills suspense in the reader. It gives the space below the drop-off the claustrophobic feel of a short tunnel. By drop-off, we receive imagery that our writer is suspended high up on the rock wall they are scaling, and height alone is enough to convey terror. Height is synonymous with danger. Furthermore, by comparing the drop-off to a short tunnel, this conveys a sense of entrapment to the reader. Not only are tunnels claustrophobic, but they are liable to cave-ins. By evoking this idea, the writer is showing us that they are actively engaged in a potential life or death situation. If something were to go wrong... Oh, I apparently did not finish this sentence. I've got, if something were to go wrong, thus building up our tension. I think I was trying to say something along the lines of, like, if something were to go wrong, there would be no escape from the tunnel. If there was, like, this idea, is creating this idea of, like, a cave-in, and if that were to happen, there would be no escape, and it would result in your death. So that's probably where I was going with that bit. Another way suspense and tension... This is a good example for why you proofread your answers in your actual exam. Obviously, and also just to quickly mention, I didn't do this timed. I haven't done it under exam conditions. So a good way to practice is to actually time yourself writing essay questions. Another way suspense and tension is built up through the writer's Another way suspense and tension is built up is through the writer's blasé use of rock climbing jargon. They describe the technique they are using to climb and give a helpful comparison so readers who lack knowledge of rock climbing can access it. This technique is known as stemming or chimneying. You can imagine using it to climb up the inside of a chimney. Once again, this image evokes feelings of claustrophobia in the reader. The average person would refrain from climbing up a narrow chimney. Therefore, despite being safe in this part of the text, the writer's overly relaxed explanation puts us on edge. It builds up anticipation of something going wrong as the stakes are incredibly high. From this flowing structure, the writer switches their writing style as things begin to go wrong. Grammatical pauses are introduced, which reflects the writer's sense of time moving in slow motion. Time dilates as if I'm dreaming, and my reactions decelerate. The use of the natural verb dilates. Sorry, I'm just trying to... My phone is going funny. The use of the natural verb dilates shows the writer is creating imagery of childbirth, a lengthy process. This further emphasises how slow time seems to be moving for the writer, and as we are forced to slow our reading pace, we too experience how the writer felt in that terrifying moment. This association also highlights the writer's loss of control, something they perceive to have in the beginning of the text. They have moved from a position of expert or knowledgeable rock climber to a defenceless victim at the mercy of nature. So basically, it's trying to, it's looking out for associations like that. So the word dilate, you think of dilation when a woman is in labour. So it's kind of looking for those patterns, for those connotations, and explaining them and sort of developing them and going along. I probably haven't done it in the best way here, but it's just to try and give an example of, like, once you have that idea, once you're confident in your idea, you have to follow it the whole way through, because that's what gets you the high marks. A lot of the times you see some students who, they have really good ideas and valid ideas, but they kind of throw them out there and they don't follow it all the way through, so it doesn't make sense. And also I sort of reworded that bit off the cuff there with the use of natural verb dilates, because once again, haven't proofread, so I have the writer is creating imagery of childbirth, which actually probably does read right, but my brain was like, that doesn't read right. Okay, so the next part. Short sentences are introduced towards the end of the text to highlight the futility of escape, but I'm stuck. The previous long sentence emphasises the physical exertion the writer undergoes to free his arm, but this jarring sentence reveals their attempts are all in vain. It creates a tone of defeatism as well as exhaustion. This leaves us with a feeling of helplessness, mirroring what the writer is experiencing during this traumatic event. We are left wondering how they will be rescued, which creates a significant amount of suspense and tension as their life is now in mortal danger. In conclusion, the writer details their descent from a secure position of expertise to their life literally hanging in the balance. Through their use of technical jargon, precise language, and change in structure, the reader is left to feel tension and in suspense as the writer places us in an uncertain position to mirror their horrific experience. So conclusions and introductions are really important in your essays. It's what brings the whole text together. And obviously what I would highly recommend is that when you're in the exam, make sure you give yourself time to plan your answers. For the final question, I'm not happy with how my introduction sounds, but I don't necessarily have the time to work on it. But what you should do is, if you've planned out your answer, I would suggest plan the main body of your text first, and then your introduction, you will know what to say because you know what you're going to explore in your essay, and you can not go into too much detail of what you're going to talk about in the main part of your essay. But the introduction is the setup to let your examiner know that, yep, I've understood this question, I've understood the text, and this is what I'm going to talk about. So, question 5. Or first I'll read for question 5, it's the comparison question. So compare how the writers present their ideas and perspectives about their experiences. Detailed examples from both the texts, including brief quotations. So I would argue that you should do 2 detailed points from both texts. So you take 2 quotations each from the text, so you end up with 4 points. There's no right or wrong way to do a comparison question. Some people prefer to talk about one text and then talk about the other one and compare in that way. Some people like to start with one text but then weave in the other text with it. And some like to do a combination of both. So there's really no right or wrong way. It's just what you prefer. And you can talk about similarities or differences or both. It's completely up to you. Personally, I find differences in the text much more interesting to talk about. I mean, it's easier to come up with things that are different between them, and that can create like a really interesting dialogue or argument, in this case where you're writing an essay. But it's really up to you, and there's no right or wrong, and you won't be penalised if you only talk about similarities or only talk about differences. It's just preference. Okay. So this is what I came up with. Both writers detail their separate dangerous experiences. However, their perspectives and approaches are entirely different. The writer of the rock climbing piece is experienced at his craft and relives a traumatic event, whereas the writer of the ice swimming piece is new to this type of environment and is open-minded about joining this sport. Structurally, for the text about ice swimming, the writer paints a tranquil scene. The grammatical pause creates a soft tone and makes the image sound incredibly inviting. By the time we've found the right beach, the fire is already lit and it's burning beautifully. The alliteration also serves the soft expression and assists in emphasising the cosy and peaceful setting. Even the opening phrase, in its relaxed nature, reflects the writer's calm state of mind. They are not bothered about punctuality. In comparison to this relaxed opening, the writer of the rock climbing piece is active and throws readers into the midst of the action. I come to another drop-off. This sharp sentence in use of determiner conveys to the reader that the writer has been rock climbing for a prolonged period of time. It connotes a sense of adrenaline due to the fast pace of the sentence. We can therefore assume the writer has not taken a break and is not willing to do so. This places us in a position of passivity, similar to the other text. However, this setting is completely uninviting. We are with the writer near a perilous drop-off drop off a rock face, rather than safely on the ground by a warm fire with our ice swimmer writer. Unlike the rock climbing text, the writer of the ice text details conversations they shared with the group of swimmers. They detail the response to their inquiry about why they chose to partake in such a dangerous sport. It's about doing something crazy because we all need a bit of craziness in our lives. This shows it was a community experience rather than a solitary one, as in the case of our rock climbing writer. By seeking advice, it shows our ice swimming writer is open-minded to new perspectives and experiences. They want to learn more about this exclusive world and to become a part of it. This is further highlighted through their positive reflections on the experience. It certainly feels good to be alive, standing on that snow-covered beach wrapped in towels and coats and fleeces. Their formal tone suggests they are an older writer, but their questions throughout the text proves they are not knowledgeable about ice swimming and are therefore in a position of learning. In comparison to this positive perspective, the end of the rock climbing writer's text ends in a series of terrifying reflections. From a position of control using technical jargon describing in detail the utilisation of rock climbing techniques, the writer is left completely vulnerable as a boulder crashes towards them. When I look up, the backlit chalkstone falling toward my head consumes the sky. This is a reversal of control. The writer is using technical jargon to describe the type of rock that is descending towards them, and the personification effect and verb consumes connotes that the chalkstone is metaphorically in power of this situation. It provokes fear in the reader at the thought of the writer feeling like they are going to be devoured by this gigantic boulder. Shadows are cast as the boulder is blocking out the sky, and this creates a claustrophobic feeling. We are experiencing what the writer felt at that time. Overall, it leaves us feeling uncomfortable and helpless. In conclusion, the rock climber writer reflects on a solitary near-death experience and the negative emotions they experienced during this time, whereas the ice swim writer shares details of an overly positive experience where they witnessed a sense of community and found a new place to belong. So that's just an example of like how I personally would approach that question and some of the things, some of the techniques you can use to sort of help you. I'll just briefly talk about the transactional writing one. I haven't actually written a mock answer for these two, but you have a choice of either question 6 or question 7, and both of them you're given a quote which acts as your writing prompt, and transactional writing is writing that's geared towards a specific purpose, so you're often aware of your audience, the form and the purpose of why you're writing it. So question 6 is, there is no point in travelling when you can see everything and learn about places on television and the internet. And it says, write an article for a magazine giving your views on this statement. And then they give you 2 pointers. You might want to include advantages and disadvantages of travel, advantages and disadvantages of learning about places on television and the internet, and then any other points you wish to make. So for this one, obviously with a magazine, magazines can be formal or informal. They're completely up to you. So you could choose the tone of your magazine and you could just respond to that question. And then the other one, question 7, was schools and colleges have a duty to ensure their students keep fit, and you're meant to write a speech in which you express your views on this statement. And speeches tend to be more formal, but once again, they could be more conversational. And the tips they give you are who should have responsibility for student fitness, should there be extra time for physical education in schools, and you can make any other points. But they're just prompts. You can sort of, so long as you answer the writing task, you can respond to it in any way you want. But the interesting thing about these are they're obviously trying to provoke a reaction in you as a writer as well as a reader. So they're very sort of provocative quotes in terms of they're trying to get a reaction out of you. They're trying to get a response. So it should be impassioned what you write about, which kind of could be perceived as being a bit more of a formal tone. But like we've discussed with magazines, magazines can also be informal. So it's just going with how you feel. I hope this video has helped in some way. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them below. And I hope it's helped, and I'll try to at some point do this for paper 2. Thank you. Bye.